Gotcha, gotcha. What you been up to?
Not much, man. Just took a nice salt bath. It's been a minute. It's crazy how every time you do that, you like it feels instant relief. Like
Yeah,
15 minutes.
yeah.
It's pretty good.
15 minutes in the salt bath. Yeah, I do that too. I try to take it like super hot sometimes, and sometimes I start sweating. I get because it's so hot, and I start kind of almost having a little panic attack where I'm just like, oh man, this is too hot. And so I start testing like how long I can stay in there.
I think you told me about that a while back, and it helped when you start feeling sick. You kind of push it out. It's almost like you induce a fever, and then your body kind of kicks into third gear.
Yeah, dude, I've done that for years. Like, I always tell everyone about that too. It's like
A
anytime
good
you're
one.
sick, if you don't have access to a sauna, and take a really hot bath. Like as soon as you feel the first symptoms, and then it sweats it out. Like you
Right.
think about it, it makes perfect sense because you're inducing a fever before the body like actually has an onset of its own fever. So you kind of sweat
Um,
it out, turn up the temperature in the body. Like every time I do that, almost every time, uh, it, whatever sickness that I have, either it doesn't fully come on or it just goes away really quickly.
right. I felt the same thing. Felt like I almost felt a little sick after, and then once I was kind of cooling down out of the bath, like maybe an hour after, it was like noticeably felt better.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Uh,
Yeah, man. What we getting into?
Relationships, what the dynamics between men and women, female and male.
I love it. The good quote by our good friend George Carlin that men are stupid and women are crazy, and women are crazy because men are stupid.
That makes good sense, actually.
But we learn to contend with each other.
Uh, I feel like a lot of it, comes to, and not, it's not always like absolute that, men are like, even like in a, like if, a male has, a masculine energy, that's the only energy that we have. I think we both have a little bit of both, so I have some, feminine qualities, as well as some masculine qualities. But I think, you know, there is, some difference in terms of, especially in communication. Like I think that's one of the areas where I feel like I've seen it the most,
Mm,
or at least interpreting like each other's communication. I think have you felt things like that?
yeah, big time. I think the core of a lot of issues in relationships kind of stems from that is communication. But I mean, when you look at it too, it's like men and women don't really want different things. I think they prioritize safety differently. So it's how, you know what I mean, how we go about that, I think is a core thing. Women, I mean, yeah, I guess just that in itself in a nutshell is a thing as we see what safety is differently. But similar to what you said too, of like every Carl Jung's whole thing, anima, animus, like every man has feminine in him, every woman has masculine in them. And I think we're kind of being misguided nowadays where you see women with more overcompensating with masculine traits, call it the girl boss thing, independence, basically get your own. And men, I feel like, it's unquestionable that men nowadays don't have the same grit that they used to.
Yeah,
It's like society's kind of softened us in that sense where we
yeah,
have instant gratification of things. It's like you don't really need to try as hard anymore. We've outsourced our relationships to,
yeah.
men being chronically online, and this pornography epidemic for sure isn't helping anything. It's killing men's testosterone. So it's just like
Yeah.
everything's changed. I think we feel that in our relationships.
Do you think that it's just do you think that it's just like men losing like testosterone or their masculinity, or do you think it could be could be both. Like I kind of feel like modern society is making it to where, like, of course, like men don't. Uh, Obviously, we don't live the same lives that we used to, like, even 50 years ago, or obviously like hundreds of years ago. Um, but at the same time, I think for women, it's also changed too. So if women are also becoming less feminine and the men also at the same time becoming less masculine, then it's kind of like a self like perpetuating system.
For sure. I think it's a natural, like, bouncing will take place. You know, women don't want to have to step in, I would argue, hard into their masculine role, just like men don't want to have to be pushed into their feminine role. But you
Yeah.
see that in relationships when, the tides kind of start shifting and women feel not protected or safe and their man's not stepping up. So they kind of step into that role and, they'll handle it, which kind of demasculates the man. So it's like you almost see the a flipping occurs. You know what I mean? Like when one starts taking, the other starts giving. It's like
Mm,
natural push and pull of it. And I think the dynamic of a good relationship is when a man can make his woman feel more feminine and vice versa. You really step into your roles, but I think we're in a time where those roles are blurred and the expectations aren't. So it's like women still want a grounded masculine man and men still want that feminine warmth, but both are being told to basically act the same.
yeah. Like, what do you think about the whole, because do you feel like there's a whole kind of like push against uh the masculine or you heard the term like toxic masculinity?
Right.
What do you think about that? Do you think that's kind of like overplayed? Do you think that's an actual thing or that's an actual issue?
I'd say to a degree, because you could see it in kind of like, the hardcore, call it red pill communities, where it's been taken to an extent of, like degrading women. Like it's men, young men specifically, that have been led astray. And, you know, I can't say I disagree with everything guys like Andrew Tate say, but that core message that's kind of like women are dispensable, basically treat them like shit, frankly, and they'll be stuck on you. Like that whole method doesn't work out. So if you want to call that like toxic masculinity, I'd say yeah, then that like exists. But I
Yeah.
think we're putting a damper on young men these days, basically telling them to like soften up. And like,
Mm,
I think a degree of that's not helping. There needs to be almost more of like a focus on what the good quality traits are in the masculine, in that frame of masculinity, which is like be protective of your partner, be driven, focus on the things that'll help your relationship grow and not, some weird psychological game of like, I don't need you kind of
yeah.
thing.
Andrew Tate style. Now I was talking to a friend and he was telling me, and I thought this was interesting. He was saying for men, especially like in modern time, he feels like there's no rite of passage for men nowadays, where
Right.
where you've heard other societies. I think it's like the Greeks or something like that. They used to like the men when they reached a certain age, they would go out and like kind of go out in the wilderness on their own and survive for a certain amount of time. And then when they came back, they're considered a man now. And so, like, but in our society now, like, what do we have that would be like the equivalent to that? Or do we even have that? So it's kind of like, do you ever, without that rite of passage of like becoming a man, we're kind of missing that in today's society.
I think that's a good one, easily overlooked. I never thought on that either, but that makes a lot of sense. You don't really have many rites of passage at all anymore. When you think of it, you have like certain ceremonial things, graduation, accomplishments, but I feel like all of that's gotten kind of corporatized. You
You
know,
think of you think about it, it's kind of like Carl Jung when he speaks about kind of like the subconscious and like rituals. like that has a symbolic effect on the subconscious. So when you do things like that, I think even for the subconsciously or consciously, it does kind of change the person. It's like, oh, you know, this makes me a man now. Like I should act differently. I have
Right.
more responsibility. I have certain things.
No, I think that's a huge component. I think role models too in general. It's like, they say you are the accumulation of like your five closest friends around you. I think that's where things start spreading so fast too, is when you don't have people around you that are really like holding themselves up like that.
Mm,
Then, especially when you're younger, like if you don't have real role models around you, you kind of just absorb the patterns and tendencies everyone else kind of acts at, how they treat women, how they treat themselves.
I
I
mean,
think that's a huge thing.
do you think like Andrew Tate, you know how like so a lot of people would consider him like toxic masculine. Um, but do you think that he is just kind of a reaction of the lack of masculinity? So then there's kind of like an extreme, it kind of pushes back in the extreme in a certain way where there's this need for like more masculinity. Because I've heard some of the things that he says, like, and I don't agree with a lot of the stuff he says, but then there are other things that he says that I feel like, you know, it does make sense. Like there is some truth mixed with, you know, some of the other messaging that he's putting in there.
For sure. I think you nailed it. It's an overcompensation or it's a response due to kind of the current state of things, which is like, I mean, it's pretty obvious there's a lack of masculinity as a whole,
Yeah,
which naturally drives a lack of femininity, or the response to that is, women basically saying like, we're gonna go do our own thing. We don't need any man. That whole sentiment and what call it girl boss stuff is like
yeah,
they're both kind of a reaction to each other. When men start doing one thing, they're tied to each other naturally. So I feel like the roles in general of what a man is and what a woman is has been slowly kind of fracturing, but they bounce each other out. When
yeah,
men start being that in that tone, overcompensating, trying to really create that clear message of like, do yours, screw everyone else, basically, like you're out to get your own. Women kind of ended up doing the same thing because then they feel like they're left behind,
yeah,
where it's that's the part I think. And I haven't listened to too much of Andrew Tate as an example, but I think that's where it starts going awry, is where it's like a lack of respect for women. They could feel that, and it usually doesn't go over well. They say men want respect and women want understanding at the end of the day. Or I've
yeah,
heard it phrased differently too, is like men want peace and women want support, emotional support, understanding. And I feel
right.
like we basically give each other what we want when you think of it
Yeah,
in that
that's true.
sense. You know what I
I
mean?
feel that too. You know, that reminds me too, is like a friend, he was telling me about a situation with his wife, and he was telling me, he was like, man, I just want her to like understand what I'm saying. Like, I just want her to. He was telling me, he was like, you know, he was like, let's say like something happens, and you're trying to like clarify for your wife or your girlfriend or whatever. And he was like, a lot of times, like I just want her to realize what I'm saying or understand what I'm saying. But then I was thinking, I was like, actually, I think it's both sides are kind of like that. Like women do want to be heard, guys want to be understood.
Right.
It's really very similar.
When you Because I've heard, like when it's a communication thing where it's like when by and large this isn't always the case. When men get stressed, they tend to be like, "Give me some space," and when women get stressed, it tends to be like, "I want to talk this out." I've
Yeah,
been in both sides of that. You know what I mean? Where it kind of
me
depends on the
too.
situation. Where you're like, "We need to talk this out now," or it's just like, "All right, I gotta go."
I
Well,
think for me it depends on the subject because I would say most of the time I wanna talk it out directly, like as soon as possible, and try to resolve the situation.
right,
And then what I've learned over time is like not like I think that's actually I guess the masculine part of me. that wants to solve the problem like right
Right.
away and try to institute a solution like immediately. And sometimes I think, like I've heard people say, it's like sometimes the better thing to do is just listen, not to try to problem solve all the time.
Right.
From the woman's perspective, like they don't always want you to try to problem solve it immediately.
Right.
Sometimes just listen. So yeah, that's something that I've learned over time.
Likewise, man. I've learned that lesson the hard way where it's just like naturally my brain is just like, you have a problem, let's like resolve it right now. And then it's like, why are you always trying to solve my problems? I just want to be heard. And I'm just like, I don't understand that. I thought we were looking for solutions right now.
We're pulling our hair out over here.
It's interesting. They
Yeah.
say masculine energy builds the road, and women's energy is what fills it with life, kind of concept, or the
Mm,
saying of men push things, women push men.
mm. I've always had this theory like this. It's like, when you look at the world, people say that the world like is predominantly, controlled by men. And like obviously if you look, at, maybe, the leaders in power and things like that, or, military power, or like the overt power in the world, you would say like obviously it's masculine control. But I always think that, you know, I feel like the feminine energy obviously is more subtle. I feel like a lot of what men do is driven by women. Like some of the
Mm,
decisions that we make, the choices that we make, the influence that they have on us, like it's
for
driven
sure.
by women. So if you look at it more in depth, like I would say a lot of what's happening in the world is also uh, under the influence of women just as
For
much.
sure. That's a really good point. Yeah,
Uh,
that resonates true for sure.
like you look at the average guy and like how many decisions like have you as a guy made based on women? Like
Dude, so many.
you even like working out or
Right.
like
What
the type of
motivates
job
you?
that you want or
Right.
like how much money you need to make or all these different things. So it's kind of like in a sense, you make a lot of decisions based on for I think a lot of men, I'm not saying all men do this, but I would say a lot of men like make a lot of their decisions based on what they whether it's a future woman or the woman that they have or
Right.
whatever.
I think that could even be subconscious to them too, because sometimes you got to pull back and look at it and be real with yourself. You know what I mean? I could say for myself, like on a personal sense, that I remember being younger, 13, 14, and being like, man, I gotta build some traits or skills or something that'll attract women. So that's
Yeah,
what pushed me into being like, oh, I'm gonna start learning to play a guitar or working out, or if I
yeah,
learn to cook, women will find that attractive. So like that's what propelled me, to even find those interests, and then you get into them, and you're like, oh, I actually like these things. But
yeah,
I
yeah,
can, I can be real and say that that's like what initially pushed me is like I gotta find, I gotta make a way to where women will find me attractive. What do I do to do that?
yeah, yeah. Like I think for some women they would be surprised like how many decisions men make based on that. Like based
Sure.
on, you know, whether it's their future prospects of women or the women that they're with currently. Like
Right.
a lot of that decision making for men is for that, or even just like the decisions we make for the safety of our family, whether it's where we live or certain things. A lot of that is influenced by the that feminine energy.
Big time. I love the whole animus concept, and like you think of it individually as a person, you really do want to be able to hold both of those equally, because
Mm,
when you're kind of leaning too much on one or the other, it's not good. You know what
yeah,
I mean? like women being that feminine energy, which is nurturing, compassion, caring. That's great and all, but they have to have a little bit of an ability to ground themselves also, that masculine energy. Same.
That's a good point, actually. That's a really good point
Right.
because, like, you could even see that in, I've experienced that in terms of parenting, where it's like, but I guess maybe, I guess maybe in a sense, in the moment I was thinking it was unbalanced, but maybe in a sense it was actually just a counterbalance to what I was feeling in the masculine.
For
But
sure.
I've also looked sometimes and thought, man, like couldn't you give them a little bit more discipline here or
Right.
something like that? But then maybe that just wasn't, you know, the role in that moment. And because in a sense, when I look back at it, I was thinking, if I'm being the masculine and I'm being the one who wants to instill discipline and certain things with the children, and then maybe just as a reaction, you know, uh, they're kind of doing the opposite. It's more nurturing, more caring, more,
Right.
yeah, things like that. But on the outside, I'm kind of looking at it like, hey, can't you add a little bit more discipline
Right.
so I could be a little bit more more laid back.
No, it's for sure true. I think we've talked about too of like it reminds me of the build, break, build thing. That strategy works probably well across because it's a natural balance. You want to be able to discipline someone, but also show that you have compassion, care, and understanding, and then shift back to, you know what I mean? It's kind of like be
Actually,
real, but also hold both spears at the same time, you know?
that's funny. Is I always talk about that, but I never really thought about it in terms of masculine, feminine. But
Uh-huh.
that's a good way to think about it, actually. Because I like to do that even in um, just communication style, period. Like anytime, especially if I have like difficult conversations with people, like I like to do build, break, build. Or if I, or I'm like I always tell people too, um, especially in your relationship, like if you're having difficult situations or just maybe even an argument or something like that, like I also think about it as like, the subconscious is always recording. So you're creating kind of maybe had a negative experience there. So you can, shortly after, you should intentionally like create something like positive or lighter
Right.
so the subconscious can actually balance the energy.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting concept of, I think, as we mentioned even before, was that it feels like when you're in a solid relationship, you can be more of your own energy and it's like relaxed. You know what I mean? It's like the woman can have more of the channel their feminine and the man can channel more of his masculine, and it works because I think naturally that's what builds attraction. When you
Yeah,
start losing that and the woman feels like she needs to step into her masculine, she's not going to be as attracted to her man because now he's going to be a little more feminized.
yeah.
So it's like
That,
those polarizing features is what creates, I think, attraction in relationships. Is when your woman
that's a
goes,
good
"And my man's a real man," and the man's like, "Oh, I got a real good woman. She's a solid."
point.
Goes
Now,
both ways.
do you think like is there things that like you as like a male can do to maybe enhance the feminine attributes, like intentionally, of your
Okay.
woman? Or maybe in the reverse, maybe this would be easier to answer. Is there anything like that your woman can do that you feel like activates like the masculine in you?
For sure. I think it's that, man. It's giving space. A good answer from the woman's side first is you don't want how do you phrase it nicely, but you don't want like a woman kind of trying to wear the wallet, and I don't think naturally women really want to do that, where
Yeah.
it's taking direction, taking action,
Mm,
feeling like they need to step up and kind of take control. I think deep down, a lot of women want to be taken care of. They want to have that sense of security. And like as a man, personally, it feels great when you can do that. It's like, oh, I got my house in order. You know,
Yeah.
I could take care of my woman. It makes me feel more masculine. And I think that's what naturally happens. You know, that's how
Mhm.
you shift into it. Is you, as a man, you should be able to show your woman that like not only are you safe, that you can keep her safe, but that you know you're good financially, you're good, your house is in order. I think that's what creates the natural
You're a
respect for each other,
stable, you're a
increase
stable
your
place. She
attraction.
could, yeah, you're a stable place she could kind of depend on if needed.
Right, you kind of have to make the home yourself. And maybe who knows? It's hard to say if it starts with men, you know. But in the sense that the masculine trait is to kind of, you know, call it dominate or control, but it's really just leading. You know, so in the sense is I think that's where men kind of fall short is they don't lead the way they should, and that will trigger the woman to be like, well, fuck, dude, I gotta lead now, and then you have a disparity. Then there's an issue.
So yeah, so like one of the things that like I think too, like women look for, maybe not consciously, maybe somewhat consciously too, is that I think they also look for like the men to be confident, but I don't even know if confident is the right word, but maybe like assured in their decision making sometimes.
Right. Like a very what is that word? Just decisive.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
absolute. You're absolute in what you want. And, like, because I think when women can smell fickleness too, there's a
Yeah,
lack of attraction in that. You know, no one likes a fickle person. Seem
yeah.
dangerous in a sense.
Yeah, you're not sure of yourself or sure of the decision that you're making or the direction that you want to take things or so I think in a sense sometimes like they're actually looking to you for the direction, looking to you to be like, are you sure?
All right.
And then you have to if you're like, oh, I don't know,
I mean, you see that too with like how, and I don't think women would deny it, but by and large, they kind of test men, you know, and that's a part of some of those tests you see. It's kind of like, how's he going to react? Is he going to be emotional and like act like a bitch right now, or is he going to kind of get it together and check me? You know,
yeah,
sometimes I think that's subconscious, where it's like
yeah,
women will poke men enough and say, is he going to check me, or is he going to falter and kind of not do anything about it?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so because I think you're right too. I think sometimes they want to see but I think all people do this. Like I think children do this. Like they test. Like even in a like if you look at two kids playing, they'll even test the boundaries of each other.
For
And
sure.
so I've always told even my kids when they were little, like I told them like you teach people how they treat you, and so you have to set the parameters. And so I think like even for men, like in the reverse to women and women to men like I think to a certain extent, like the women are kind of like you saying testing, and so
Mm,
sometimes testing even boundaries sometimes. And I think for a man, like if you're strong and you're assured, like you know where the boundaries are, you know what you truly feel about certain things. Like you won't let yourself, um, you know, just be a pushover. I guess.
right.
Yeah.
I think it's necessary, you know, in the ways that women help shape men, you know, possibly sometimes even unbeknownst to them, but that's what's taking place behind the scenes is that kind of gentle poking. I think what can is how women help men be more of a man, and
Yeah.
women reassure or and men can reassure women to stay more in their feminine by basically stepping into that role.
Yeah. And then it's interesting too because I think they also enhance each other too. I know for sure like there are things that you know in relationships that I've had that you know has made me feel more masculine. Like it enhances the masculinity in me when you know maybe she you know when she is maybe relying on me you know for protection or you know just certain things you know I couldn't even pick you know it absolutely even, the specific things every time, but I know for sure there are certain moments or certain actions that she as a woman does for me that makes me feel more masculine, and
Right.
me, as a man, can do for her that makes her feel more feminine.
Big time. I think they, like you said, they feed into each other.
Yeah.
That's the natural dance that should take place. But once one side kind of starts pushing in the opposite end, it could spiral pretty quick. And it's like, how can you lose attraction quickly in relationships like that? And you see it with, I've got a handful of friends in relationships that you see that with when they kind of lose respect for each other. And
Mm,
it goes downhill quick when one person in the relationship starts speaking badly about their partner, especially to other people, things
mm,
like that.
yeah.
Once you lose that respect, the attraction, all of that just starts spiraling quick, you
Yeah.
know?
That's true. I heard a guy who was speaking about relationships one time, and one of the wisest things I've heard is he said that, if you can't protect yourself from your own inner voice, then how do you expect to protect the person you're with from your inner voice as well? When you're speaking bad about your partner and all those things. And I was like, huh, that makes a lot of sense. Like
Right.
usually people who do that also talk bad about themselves internally too.
For sure. That does make sense.
Yeah,
Could stem from insecurity or anything, but yeah,
exactly.
it's interesting, man.
Interesting, interesting. Yep. Oh, another successful chat, my
Another successful chat.
friend. Awesome, awesome. No, but we'll be doing these live podcast each Wednesday, 6 p.m. same time. You're in Texas, so it's 8 p.m. over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, 8 p.m. over there.
Okay.
And then we'll be doing our Sunday chats as well at 11 a.m. So I hope you guys join us. The link is in the bio, and stay posted.
Looking forward to the next one.
All right, brother. Thank
All
you
right,
for
bro.
joining once again.
Always.
Thank you
Love you,
guys for
man.
joining.
Take care,
Love you
everyone.
guys. What up, Michael? What's up,
Michael.
Cosmic Love Queen? See you guys.